And through the magic of television, look what we've got here. I am almost done with the plying. Here's what's left on the 2 spindles. As you can see, there was a lot less on this one than on this one. So I'm going to finish this up and then I'll show you all the finishing steps. I kind of wanted to show you a little bit of the plying too from this angle, because when Elise and I were filming the last one, I was doing it kind of in reverse of how I normally ply, so that we could try to get better lighting. So anyway, bear with me. I'm going to do the last little bit of plying here. And again, I just feed it through my fingers, or my fingers through the singles. And I just go up pretty much as far as I can reach. And that's not very far, so then I let it go and I bring it up on my leg to catch it, and then I wind it on. And this is starting to get kind of full, so I just make sure I kind of go up under the spindle whorl itself to catch on the notch there. Sorry, Elise. Catching it on, there it is. There's the notch, putting it back over the hook, starting it up again. So I'm almost done with this, and then I'm going to show you how to measure it without a nitty-knotty, because I don't have a nitty-knotty yet. I would like to get one eventually, but they're definitely not requirements. They're convenient tools for sure, and I'm all about gadgets and convenient tools. But if you don't have a nitty-knotty, I've got a great way to show you how to measure your yarn and make it into a skein. So now you can see here, if you look right here, I've reached the leader on that spindle. So this one is just about done. I'm going to pick it up and wind it on. Just a little bit more. Okay, so when I get to the point that I'm just at the leader, I'm going to take my scissors and just cut that. Okay, and just let that go. Now, because again I feel all kinds of secure and nice when I have a knot, I will just take this and you might hear animal noises in the background. We apologize. Actually, it's kind of fun. So do a little knot in the end, because again that makes me feel all kinds of secure. Then we've got this ready to turn into a skein. So I'm going to take these out and set them aside. And I'm going to pop this in here in the Lazy Kate. Now, and you're going to want to step back here, sweetheart. Depending on how many, or like about how big this is, you can either measure it into a 2-yard skein or a 1-yard skein. Sometimes I'll do a 1.5 yard skein. It doesn't really matter how you do it. You just have to keep track as you're measuring it out. Now, because I don't have a nitty-knotty, I use my handy-dandy dining room chairs. And what I do, I'm going to do this one in, I think I'll do this in a 2-yard, yeah, I'm going to do this in a 2-yard skein. Sorry, I was distracted there. So what I do is I measure, because 2 yards is 72 yards. So I will measure from this chair over to this chair and make sure that it's 36 yards on this side. So then I know that if I were to loop this all the way around, I would have 72 yards. Okay, so if you wanted to do just a 1-yard skein, you would do half of that. Half of a yard is 18 inches. So it'd be 18 inches on this side, and then looped around, it would be a full yard. Okay, I just like the, I like doing a 2-yard skein because, especially if you've got a little bit thicker yarn, it's not as compact, it's not as tight. There's more room to let the water in that we're gonna do for the bath. So let me make sure this is 36 again. Oops. Pull that out till... Okay, so that's about 36 inches. Now, what I love about this, again, is that these little guys are on bearings, and so just like when they were spinning for plying, if I have it on my Golding, I can just do it like this and spin it for measuring out. So now this is going to get tedious and I apologize, but I start counting. So I secure, let's start over here. I secure this end and make sure it's not going to go anywhere. I just kind of wrap it around that first pass and then hold it with my thumb. And so that's 1 yard, okay? So then I just go around and I go, every time it comes over here to my other hand, okay, let's try that again here. Every time it comes around the chairs, I know that's another yard, so that would be 2. And then once that's secured, you won't have to hold it anymore. So that's 3. Okay, and forgive me because I am now going to count. 4, 5, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's right, okay. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, hopefully without losing count, I want to say 13 that I love. See how fast this is going? 14, 15, it makes it so much easier. 16, 17, 18, 19, oops, 20, almost there, 21, 22, 23, dog's barking, oops, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Okay, so almost 30. So let's see where our end is. Yeah, actually 30. Rarely does it turn out quite this perfect, but in this case it did. So we're going to call this 30 passes, but because it's 2 yards each, that's actually 60 yards. Okay, so remember that number. And then, oh, sorry, at least the ends here. I just tie the ends together. I do what's called a surgical knot, even though I have a hard time believing surgeons actually do this. But you do the one little knot like you're tying your shoes, and then you pass this under, but then you pass it under again. And it, well, that broke. But what's nice about that is sometimes, you know, when you do that kind of a double knot, you pull and it'll slip the knot, like the knot will move. If you do that surgeon's knot, it doesn't do that. And usually it doesn't, the end doesn't break like that either. Okay, so I'm going to cut this, trim it up. Okay, so now we have, oh, here, let me grab these real quick. I'm going to use my leader. Normally I wouldn't do this, but I wasn't very well prepared for this, so I'm going to use my leader to cut up ties for the skein. So, like I said, remember that number, we've got 60 yards of 2-ply. Okay, what that means is that for the purposes of counting like how many singles you did, that means you did I did 120 yards of singles. There was some confusion at one point in our online group as to how you count the singles. People were getting kind of frustrated because they thought that they actually had to measure out all of the singles first on one, and then measure out all the singles on another, and then ply them together and measure all of that to figure out how many singles they spun. You don't have to do that, because we know that if we spun 60 yards of yarn and it's 2-ply yarn, then that means you combined 60 yards from one spindle and 60 yards from another spindle, put it together to make 120 yards of singles. But what I actually have here to knit with or to crochet with is 60 yards, if that makes sense. I hope it does. If not, ask me questions online. Okay, so now what you need to do, even if it's a smaller skein like this, you need to put in, they're called figure 8 ties. So in 4 different places on this, because otherwise you're going to have a big old mess when you try to get this wet. So I'm just going to cut my leader. It's getting a little raggedy anyway. Let's cut it into, I think this was hand spun at one point. Yeah, it was. So just cut it into, like, I don't even know how long that is. 4 inches? 5 inches? I don't know. Cut off a piece of string. And then before you start, make sure that you're not accidentally, when you're working on this side, that you're accidentally grabbing some of these in. Because you see what that's going to do? It's going to make a mess. So at this point, I'll kind of tug them apart just to make sure I don't do that. Okay? Then, look at this like you've got 3 chunks on this side. And then you start with one end of your tie, go up, over, and up. Okay. I hope this is working. My hands are kind of shaking. And then take the other end and go over to capture that side, under to capture that middle part, and then up top to capture the top part. And again, I do that surgeon's knot, so I go around there twice. And don't tie it all the way tight like that, because you want the water to be able to squish in to all these fibers. So keep it kind of loose, loosey-goosey, and then just tie it up here. And again, with that surgeon's knot, that way it doesn't slip all the way down and accidentally tighten your yarn. That was my finger popping. Okay, let's do the next one on this side. And don't try to match, don't do the exact same division of strands like you did for this one. Make it random, okay? Because that way you're getting extra protection from those strands trying to tangle themselves up. So you got 3 chunks. And you're just, it's like weaving. Oopsie, there we go. It's hard to get them to cooperate so I can show you. Then bring this side up to capture that part, and that part. And again, surgeon's knot around twice, keeping it nice and loose, and then there. Okay. And then we do the same thing on the other half of the skein. And I keep my finger in there just to make sure I don't accidentally tighten it up against the yarn. Okay, and then down here, so yes, I do 4 ties in 4 different places, because again, and this is the same kind of thing that you would do if you were dyeing your yarn. You want to just make absolutely sure that this is not going to get all jumbled in there. Okay, and then just because it looks prettier, I trim this nice and close to the knot. Okay, now we're ready to wash our yarn. Now, I'm going to show you the way that I do this, and the reason I do it this way is that when I first started spinning, I read a tutorial that said, and there are lots of tutorials out there, different methods, you know, it all depends on what is good for you and what you like doing and what works for you and the fiber that you're using. So there's my disclaimer. But the one that I read over and over again said to bring some water to a boil and then lower the temperature, put your yarn in there and let it simmer. Okay, so I did that, but unfortunately I did it with, it was a It was a skein where I had applied, I think it was like BFL with some silk, the silk that I tried and failed miserably at spinning because it was really hard. And I loved how it applied together. I thought it looked really neat. It was real white BFL and then this real pretty shimmery silk. So I do this. Well, the silk colors all ran. And so what I ended up with, instead of this really pretty white barber pole yarn, is I ended up with green BFL mixed with, all that was left of the silk coloring was a little bit of copper. So yeah, it was kind of pretty, but it was not at all what I wanted, and I was so bummed because that silk was gorgeous. It was like, oh, it was absolutely gorgeous. So, that having been said, I would suggest that you don't boil your silk. I think you can probably simmer, boil whatever other fibers, although I would also hesitate doing it with Icelandic because Icelandic will felt so easily. Silk, I don't know if I just had a batch that wasn't color fast, I don't know enough about it. There we go. So after that experience, I just decided I'm going to just squish some hot water through mine and call it good. And I have had really, really good success with all of my yarn doing that. So what we're going to do is take this and see how it's twisty like that? Okay, that, if it came off and it didn't do that, if it just stayed like this nice, neat, perfect little skein, you probably, I mean, you should still maybe wash it, but setting the twist wouldn't be that big of a deal, okay? But I don't want it to do that because inevitably, if you try to knit straight from this or something that's really super twisty, then your knitting fabric, the fabric that you knit is liable to do that. It's gonna move a little bit, and you don't want that. You want your knitting to just be flat and perfect the way that you knit it. So, follow me. We're going to go to my sink. Now I know that this is not going to tangle because I put all those ties in it. And I'm just going to run some hot water. It doesn't have to be scalding hot, but a little bit warm is good. Some folks will also just soak their hand spun in one of those yarn washes like soak. I can't remember, there's another one, I can't think of the name of it right now. Just soak it in that or some wool light or something, and you can totally do that. I guess I don't think of my yarn as being terribly dirty, even though it's passed through my hands. I'm not that concerned about it. So this is my method. Do what you like. All right, so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to run it under here and I'm going to squish it. Now again, if I had some Icelandic that I had spun up, I would not squish it like this because I would end up felting it. I felted some beautiful Icelandic fleece once when I was washing it by doing this very thing. I wasn't even thinking, and I was just sick over it. So, alright, so I squish it because you want to make sure that all the fibers are wet, that it's not just water kind of sitting on top of your yarn, but that it's actually squished all the way through. Okay, now it looks like it's going to be a tangled mess, but that's the beauty of those little ties. Just find one of your ties and grab it and shake it out a little bit. And you can see exactly, oopsie. Let's see here. That one kind of shifted a bit. And sometimes they'll do that, and that's okay. Okay, there we go. I think I got it. Because I didn't tighten that very well, there's some that are a little bit looser, but it doesn't matter because it's not tangled. So that's the key. All right, so I'm going to lay this on these towels. I just keep some old kitchen towels out, are ready for this type of thing, and I roll it up and I twist it. Again, I can't stress it enough, if this were Icelandic I wouldn't be this hard on it, I would be a little bit more gentle. I even do this, la la la. I think maybe in a past life I was a grape stomper, maybe I made wine, I don't know. But this works really, really well to get all the water squished out. And then after you do that, you can unroll it and grab one of your little ties again. And then now you can see, now it's hanging more straight. Okay, it's not doing that twisty thing that it did. So just to make sure that we keep it nice and balanced, we're going to thwack it. I think this is thwacking. I think thwacking is also hitting it, but this works for me. I just, when it's wet and after I've wrung out most of the water, I just put it in my arms like that, and you can kind of hear it snap. And then I'll move it, thwack it again, Or snap it again, I guess. I just do that a few times. Okay, now it's ready to dry. And I've never done the thing where I hang it. I've heard of people hanging it from a shower curtain and then tying like a soup can here to try to weight it. Ooh, my knot came undone. Look at that. Sometimes that'll happen. Remember how when I tied that knot, part of it, the end of the fiber broke? Yeah, that can happen. But thanks to these other ties in here, it's not going to tangle up. I'll tie this in a minute. My point here is yeah, some people have been known to hang soup cans to try to weight it and stretch it out a little bit more. I don't think it needs to be stretched out anymore past the thwacking or the snapping that I just did. So what I do after this is I hang it back on my dining room chairs. And I'm going to tie this before we have anything ugly happen. And I'll just tie it real gently here so that I don't do that again. Okay, so now it gets a chance to air dry. I have a ceiling fan, so after I'm done with this video, I'm going to let it dry. And once it's dry, let me show you how to do this. Let's pretend that this dried. Okay, magic of television again. If you want to make it into a skein, have it on both ends of your hands on both ends, hands on one end each, good Lord. And then you start twisting in opposite directions. And twist again. And twist again. And twist again. And just keep twisting and twisting. And then eventually you'll get to where, it's kind of hard right now because it's still wet, but it will do that. And then you can tuck the ends together and secure them on top of one another. And then you have a pretty skein for storage. Ta-da! Yay! But I'm not going to do that right now because it's wet and I want it to dry. The other thing to remember about your yarn is that it soaked up a lot of water. Even though you wrung it out, you stepped on it, you thwacked it, you did whatever to it, it still has a lot of water in here. So I would recommend letting it dry at least 24 hours before you skein it and put it away. Because what you don't want to have happen is have some water trapped in there and have it mildew and ruin your beautiful yarn. So what I do is hang it here, and then I turn on my ceiling fan, and as I go throughout my day, I'll move it along or I'll flip it. Just make sure that it's very fluffy and open and able to be dried. And I think that is it. That is like the longest video. If you have any questions, again, get to our Hogwarts at Ravelry Drop Spindle Study Hall and let me know, and I'll do what I can to help. And thank you so much for watching.